Global, leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, you couldn't make this one up. Virgin Trains have announced it will no longer stock the Daily Mail on its trains because the newspaper is not compatible, I quote, with the Virgin Train brand and our beliefs, says a company spokesman. The company, which is 51% owned by Richard Branson, said the Mail's editorial stance on immigration, LGBT rights, and the unemployed means it is no longer eligible for distribution on its services. Well, according to PR Week, who got a leaked copy of this, the statement went on to say thousands of people choose to read the Daily Mail every day, but they will no longer be reading it courtesy of Virgin Trains. There's been considerable concern raised by colleagues about the Mail's editorial position on issues such as immigration, LGBT rights, and unemployment. We've decided the paper is not compatible. We won't be stocking it or giving it away. Well, it's extraordinary. I mean, it seemed to me the only logical thing to do was to ask Richard Branson whether he would appear on this show to justify this decision, and so what I did, using Twitter, at Richard Branson, I said, as we don't believe in censorship on my LBC show, please can you direct message me to join the conversation from 7 p.m. this evening to explain why you've banned the Daily Mail from Virgin Trains. And it's extraordinary. He's been so busy on Twitter today, at least 8 tweets he'd put out by 6 p.m. this evening, and he hasn't answered me. I'm very surprised. But hey, Richard Branson, you know, the lines are open. We'd love to hear from you. Now, unsurprisingly, the Daily Mail themselves have responded and have said this: it is disgraceful that, at a time of massive customer dissatisfaction with ever-increasing rail fares, and after the taxpayer was forced to bail out Virgin's East Coast mainline franchise, a decision strongly criticised by the Mail, that Virgin Trains should now announce that for political reasons it is censoring the choice of newspapers it offers to passengers. He goes on to say or the Mail go on to say, that they're now, Virgin Trains are selling just 3 newspapers: the Mirror, the Financial Times, and the Times. And the Mail asks, is there any coincidence that these 3 newspapers are still all pro-Remain? So they're the 2 sides of the row. And I'm asking you, do you want companies to start deciding what you can or can't read? If you're happy for firms to act like this, then please call me on 0345 6060 973, or if, like me, you think this is a rather worrying path we're going down, then text to 84850, or if you have a message you'd like me to read out for Mr. Branson, then tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and of course watch me on Facebook, comment there too. We're live still from Brussels. Well, I have to say that to me, this is a very dangerous path indeed. We have already seen people being platformed at universities, so-called safe spaces being created. We have both in America and in the United Kingdom organisations that now bombard people who advertise using conservative newspapers or television shows, and how long can it be before radio falls into that category too? And this is an attempt to stamp out free speech. You know, the limits of free speech is that you don't incite violence or hatred towards people. Perhaps some of you think the Daily Mail does inspire hatred. I tell you what, they've been horrid to me time and time again. But you know what? I believe in a free press, a free society, and an open democracy, and banning the Daily Mail from being sold on Virgin Trains is the wrong step, in my opinion. Tell me I'm right, tell me I'm wrong. Tony, a new caller to the show from Wimbledon, what do you think? Good evening.
Hiya. Well, I think you're quite right. I think the first thing is freedom of speech. You've got to give everybody all the information for them to make their own mind up. And I think that's only fair. Yep. And secondly, I don't believe Virgin own the rails anyway. So how can they run a rail line on something they don't own and stop free speech, as it were?
Well, there is a track and train separation, Tony, but they have the franchise for some of those lines. So yeah, they have shops on their trains, and you can buy, a chocolate bar, a coffee, or a newspaper. It's just that the choice of newspapers, apparently, if the Mail are right in their criticism, Tony, your choice of newspaper is the Mirror, the FT, or the Times. So if you're a leaver, you haven't got much choice, really, have you?
Well, the other thing is the type of coffee and tea they sell. Is that ethically sourced? Can we look into that? Will they stop selling certain types of coffee and tea?
Well, no, it's a fair point. No, Tony, tell me, are you a Daily Mail reader?
I do read the Daily Mail, yeah.
You do? And you like it, yeah?
Yeah.
So, Tony, stay there.
I do.
Stay there, because I've got Maloud about to come on the line from Grays, another new caller, and he's going to take a different view. And I want Maloud to speak and Tony, you to respond. Maloud, good evening. Welcome to LBC. What's your view?
Hi, Nigel. How you doing?
I'm fine. Far away. It's all yours.
Yeah. So, my view is, well, I don't like the Daily Mail. I don't read it, but I'm not here to bash the Daily Mail. I mean, plenty of people have already done that. What I want to say is the current political stance is that we're privatising the trains and the railways. And if we're privatising them, then surely you can't have it both ways. You should let these private companies do what they want. That's one of the downsides of privatising them. You don't have control on what they sell and what they don't.
Well, the argument that comes back, Maloud, from the Daily Mail is that actually substantial government money has been used to bail the whole thing out because it was losing so much money, and train operators like Virgin were about to walk away. So it's actually, to be honest with you, it's a mixture of public and private money.
You're right. You're not wrong, and I don't disagree. It's just that it's the majority privately owned. I think it's 51% owned. Yeah.
I mean, Tony.
But the thing is, sorry to interject here, but the thing is,
no, get in there, Tony. Get in there, man.
If you need a balance in life, you need a balance on everything, and for one multi-billionaire to just decide to get the balance in his own favour, I think is wrong. Whether he owns it or not, he's running on rails that are owned not by him. So surely.
That's fine.
Go on, Maloud.
It's just that private companies, usually when you want to protest against them, you do it with your money. You don't go in them. The only problem with this, though, is that you have no choice on the West Coast. You only can go with Virgin, right?
Yes, that's right.
They're using rails that they don't own.
I don't agree with
We've got to have some sway.
No, but guys, we're not discussing, guys, the privatisation of the railways. No. We can discuss the privatisation of the railways. We can discuss the ridiculous separation of track and train, all because of a European Union directive going back to the early 1990s. But Maloud, Tony likes the Daily Mail. He buys the Daily Mail. He would be affronted on that train to find a choice of simply pro-Remain newspapers. Whether it's public or private, is it right, Maloud, that the Daily Mail should be withdrawn from sale?
It's not right. It should be withdrawn, but I do believe that Virgin, as a private company, have the absolute power and to do what they want.
No, I take that point. I take the point. I thank both Tony and Maloud for that. I wonder what Marie from Wandsworth, another new caller to the show, thinks. Good evening, Marie.
Hello, Nigel. I think that what Virgin should be doing is supplying what the customers actually want. I don't want them to be a moral guardian. If they're going to be that, then they should look at the pricing. I don't want them to have a moral viewpoint. I just want them to supply as good a service as possible, which seems to be very difficult for them in terms of actual train times, etc., and actually getting where they should be on time. Been on a Virgin train, didn't find it at all comfortable, actually. Wasn't a comfortable journey. It was extremely hot. I didn't think it was a good journey at all. But there we go. I just want them to supply what the customers actually want. Perhaps they could actually try asking customers and do some sort of online survey and ask them what newspapers they would like, what refreshments they would like, whether they would like Coca-Cola or other refreshments, which ones they'd like. Because I appreciate they can't stock everything. They've got a very limited amount of space on the train. So it's not...
No, I get that, Marie.
It can't be like a small shop or a news agent or whatever. So I think...
But they were selling copies, Marie. Well, the customers were buying the Daily Mail, not huge amounts. 70 copies a day were being sold on the train, so it's not huge amounts. But maybe,
How
Marie...
does that compare to the others? How does that compare to the
I
other
don't know. I just don't know. My guess is... My guess is if you buy a newspaper, you probably don't buy it on the train, you buy it before you get to the train, is my guess.
Most
but
people
Marie,
do,
they
but
seem...
at the same time, if you've forgotten, you may have rushed.
Yeah,
whatever,
no, sure,
you may not.
sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, what they're saying here is fascinating. It is that editorially, the Daily Mail's stance on the unemployed. I mean, I haven't been conscious
it's completely
of
wrong.
the Daily
I'm
Mail
really
being
getting fed
beastly
up
to
with
unemployed people. I mean, do you need protecting from yourself, Marie? That's the question.
I definitely don't need protection from myself. And what I really am getting fed up with in this country, I've noticed it creeping up on us, is the political correctness has gone crazy. It's almost gone back to the days of the complete loony left. Except it seems to be afflicting. All sides. It seems to be afflicting all sides, though. It's everywhere. It seems to be extremely fashionable. It's coming from all sides, right, middle, left, everywhere. That sort of stuff is coming from there. I'm sick to death of it. I don't need to be told what to think. I want to be able to make up my own mind, and I want companies to jolly well supply what I want. I don't want them to make, as long as it's legal, please sell it to me. If there's a market for it, sell it. I don't want you to make a moral judgment, because a lot of them should look at how they treat their staff and how they treat their customers if they're going to start getting into that. Because, really, it's a very, very rocky road, a very rocky road indeed.
Marie, you've put the case beautifully, and I tell you what, I think you should go and meet Richard Branson. I wouldn't want to argue with you, I have to say, and I'm sure he wouldn't either. I thank you. I love this one. We get wonderful text here. Evening, Nigel. I'm a regular traveller on Virgin trains from London to Manchester. I'm not a huge fan of the Daily Mail, but I would like to offer my services. I will happily spend my journeys handing out copies to anyone who would like one. How dare Virgin Trains decide, or the Virgin Trains Stasi, as he calls it, decide what we can read. Lynn in Claygate, that is a fantastic text. And you're right, free speech needs to flourish. But, as I said earlier, it isn't just Virgin Trains. What we've actually seen is quite a big attack on some of our newspapers themselves. And I'll tell you about that in a moment. You've been listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on IBC, live from Brussels, and it's 7:15. As Virgin Trains ban the sale of the Daily Mail on their trains in this country, I'm asking you, do you want companies to make these sort of decisions for you? And a very interesting text from Michelle in Putney. Good point. She says, if Virgin can ban the sale of the Daily Mail because it's incompatible with their beliefs, then why were two Irish bakers not allowed to stop serving a gay couple because of their religious beliefs? Michelle, it's a brilliant question, which I frankly can't answer. But I tell you what I can answer. Maloud said earlier that because it was a private company, they could make their own decisions. And you're right, it is a private company, albeit one, and I made this point, that's been bailed out with public money. But whether it's a private company or not, Maloud, it's providing a public service. I think getting on a train from London to Manchester is a public service. That's my view. Now, there's nothing new in this, because this has been going on now for some time. In America, there's an organisation called Media Matters, and they go relentlessly after people who advertise on Breitbart News, in fact, almost on a daily basis. And they even go for Fox News, one or two presenters on Fox News who've got some pretty strong opinions, who advertise on their shows, and they get bombarded with hundreds of people getting hold of the PR department at Fox News and saying, this person's unacceptable, going directly to the advertisers. And you can imagine, can't you? You're a PR person sitting in an advertising company, you get the odd complaint about your product or about an advert, and suddenly you're bombarded. You probably begin to think, gosh, the whole world hates this organisation, we'd best withdraw our adverts. Well, I'm sorry to say that trend has spread across to this country, because the NSPCC last year ran some adverts in the Sunday Express, and they were targeted by a new organisation set up last year that is called Stop Funding Hate. Interesting that groups on the left that object to people on the right always seem to use the word hate or something similar in their titles. And the NSPCC actually stood their ground, but in other cases, this has not happened. So Paperchase, who are a big stationery chain, did a big ad with the Daily Mail. They were then targeted, and guess what? Paperchase then publicly apologised for advertising in the Daily Mail, and it doesn't stop there, because Pizza Hut ran some adverts of how you could get a free pizza in the Sun on Sunday newspaper, part of an offer, a big promotion, and guess what? They were bombarded, and Pizza Hut apologised for advertising in the Sun. Now, the NSPCC had a bit more backbone than this, but, you know, as I say, you work for Pizza Hut, you're in the PR department, you're 24 years old, it's your first job in PR, and suddenly hundreds of people tell you that the Sun is an extremist, hateful thing, and that if you as an organisation continue to advertise in the Sun, they will stop coming to Pizza Hut. They'll tell their friends to stop coming on Pizza Hut. They'll put out online what an awful company you are, and you say, oh my goodness me, I best do something. So I panic. I think this is frightening. I think it is limiting free speech. It's an attempt to shut down debate, but to show just how balanced I like to be on this programme, there are others that take a different view. Owen Jones takes a very different view. He wrote an article saying Paperchase rejecting the Daily Mail is a victory against hatred. It is a victory for basic decency. Britain's tabloids are among the most hateful and vicious in the Western world. Don't I know it? They have dictated for far too long what is politically permissible, rallying behind policies that benefit the countries. Okay, well, it sort of gets boring when he moves on to about the elite and everything. But, you know, there are people like Owen Jones who think it's great, it's fabulous that we take away the income from organisations that push what we would broadly call conservative or patriotic views. That is what is going on out there, folks, and Virgin Trains are part of it, and I think it's repellent and dangerous. Tell me I am wrong. Oh, I'm being corrected here. I apologise, James. You've sent me by text. I said Mr. Branson. Idiot me. It's Sir Richard Branson. Virtually everyone seems to have a knighthood who we talk about on this show every evening. Our next caller is Jack from Ashford and is our fourth new caller in a row. Good evening, Jack.
Yeah, hi, Nigel. How are you doing? I think there are 2 points to this. So, First of all, as a private company, they are well within their rights to stock whatever products they like. Had they simply withdrawn them from their shelves, stopped distributing on the trains, then I think that's no problem at all. They could have done that quietly and had no issues.
Yeah.
But what they've done is that they've gone into a second stage where they've turned it into a sort of a cynical PR opportunity, possibly as an attempt to draw attention away from Lord Adonis's comments last week about the bailout. And I think once you get into that situation, you've got a case where a multi-billionaire is trying to dictate the terms of debate in this country. And I find that quite worrying. Now, I'm no fan of the Daily Mail. I really can't abide that paper and I would never buy it. However, I do worry when these sort of powerful media barons and various oligarchs start to tell me what I can and can't read.
Yes, I mean, they said that they objected to the Mail's editorial line on LGBT issues, on immigration, and on the unemployed. And Jack, I don't for the life of me understand what that bit means. Do you?
No, I wouldn't begin to guess. Incidentally, I once applied for a job at the Daily Mail, and part of the application process was to write a 3,000-word essay on what makes me angry. So make of that what you will.
Well, you know, there are lots of things that sell newspapers: sex, anger, optimism. I don't know, Jack. I mean, look, you know, the Daily Mail does represent a considerable voice in this country. It still sells considerably over 1 million copies a day. And Jack, you know, as I say, they've written all sorts of things about me, and I sort of, you know, put my head in my hands and think, why am I doing this? Why am I in politics? But I wouldn't attempt to stop them or ban them anywhere, because I believe in a free press. I mean, Jack, where do you see, I mean, you believe in free speech as I do, we maybe come from a different perspective. Where do you see the limits of free speech?
Well, I think that if somebody is inciting violence or they are publishing private medical details, then I think possibly there's a role for the state there to step in and say, no, that's not acceptable. But apart from that, I really don't see it as anybody's business to tell anybody else what they can and can't say or what they can and can't read.
Yeah, and we certainly don't want knighted billionaires trying to influence what we read and what we think, yeah?
You said it, Nigel. Thanks very much.
Terrific. Jack, great call. Thank you very much indeed. Apoplectic Daily Mail readers don't seem to understand that they can buy their newspapers elsewhere and read them. It's not censorship. It's not an attack on free speech. I get on Twitter anonymously. Oh, yes, it is. Tell me who you are. Ring up 0345 6060 973 and tell us that down the line. Paulette thinks on Facebook, another form of censorship for the people in a position to manipulate people's thinking. I can't call them the elite as I find them somewhat lacking. Andy says, well, you can't argue that it goes against people's freedom because Virgin are exercising their freedom to stock the products they wish to stock. Andy, fine. But it is, I repeat, in my view, whether it's a private company or not, that train line to Manchester and elsewhere is a public service. And they could, as our previous caller have said, if as a private company, have quietly withdrawn it. They've chosen to go to political war over it to try to make a point. They're very different things. Abbas is calling from Redbridge. Good evening.
Hi there. Good evening, Nigel. I'll be the brave one and phone up against your view, Nigel. I think it was Mark Twain.
Go for it.
Mark Twain who said that it is easy to fool people, and I think he said it's impossible, very difficult to convince people that they've been fooled. The reality is that I think we sometimes give too much credit to people being able to work out for themselves the reality of what is actually going on. The media have a very important and actually a very influential role in society. And I think going back to your point, which is that if an outlet promotes hatred, then yes, we should take action against that type of an organisation. And I think the Daily Mail actually does do that. And when we talk about...
Do you really?
Yes, I do. In fact, there was a story a few years ago, and I'm a Muslim, and there was a story a few years ago, and there's a lot of anti-Muslim sentiment in the Daily Mail anyway. But yeah, I have no problem if somebody wants to criticise my religion for whatever is truthful. But when you start making stuff up and cause hatred amongst the community, then that is dangerous. There was a story...
Abbas, is it... Abbas,
where there was a story...
Can I just ask you, Abbas?
The headlines... Sorry?
Can I just ask you something on this? Because it's a very important point. Is it anti-Muslim sentiment that you accuse the Daily Mail of, or anti-Muslim extremist sentiment?
No, anti-Muslim sentiment, because there was a story a few years ago which was Muslims stopped cooking pork in cafe. That was the headline. Now, when you read the headline, obviously people say, oh, here we go again, Muslims imposing their religion on us Brits. You know, but the reality was, when you actually read the story, it wasn't that at all. The man cooking the pork was a Turkish Muslim cafe owner. And the woman who actually complained was a non-Muslim next door because he didn't have a license. And it's misleading headlines like that and stories like that I think do promote hatred in society.
Newspapers,
and they're not positive, and they're not good.
You could argue that whether they're writing about the Catholic Church, you know, something a vicar's done with one of his parishioners, and the number of times I've looked at articles about me and thought the headline, crikey O'Reilly. Then you read it, and it's completely different. I think the newspapers do have license to write headlines that don't necessarily reflect the story. And do you know what, Abbas? They've been doing it for at least 150 years. They're not about to change. I certainly, you know, if there was a consistent campaign of singling, out a group in the community and genuinely inspiring hatred against them, then I would be with you. I don't think the Daily Mail does that. I know you do. I thank you for your point of view and your call. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on RBC, live from Brussels, and we've got the news headlines now because it's 7:30. We are not debating tonight whether you like the Daily Mail or not. Whether you do or don't, it's a very important part of our national debate. Of that, there is no question. But we are debating whether it's right for Virgin Trains running train services around this country to ban the sale of a Daily Mail and to apparently only have on the shelves Remainer newspapers. Is it right that Sir Richard Branson decides what we should be able to buy and read on his trains? That's the opinion I'm picking up. But I have to think about Westminster today because this amazing reshuffle, which has now been going on for 2 full days, it would seem, I think has now come to an end. Talking us through all of this, and my goodness me, didn't it look chaotic last night, is Theo Usherwood, LBC's political editor. Tell me, Theo, that the Prime Minister has had a better day.
She has had a better day, Nigel. Yeah. Last night we were talking about it, weren't we? And I said that the cabinet was looking very male, stale and pale. And of course it was supposed to be the diversity cabinet, bringing in fresh blood, more representative of the country that it seeks to represent. Theresa May today managed to make some changes. So if you're white, male and middle-aged, then you face the chop. There were 4 to go really, really early. John Hayes went, Philip Dunn, Sir Mark Garnier, of course, he got caught up in that furore about asking his secretary to go into a sex shop, and then Robert Goodwill went as well, resigned and sacked. So therefore it created some space for the likes of Margot James to have a promotion. She went up to, she's gone up to be Minister of State with Matt Hancock at Digital Culture, Media and Sport. Caroline Dinenage, she's a Minister of State over at the Health and Social Care, it's now called. And there are also promotions for Suella Fernandez. Of course, she's an arch Brexiteer, and that's an interesting one, because she's now the 4th member of an all leave voting Brexit department with David Davis at the helm. And of course, Steve Baker. That was another interesting one, because there was some possibility, some talk that there could be a minister in charge of a no-deal Brexit contingency planning, call it what you will, but with the specific task of going into cabinet every week and updating the Prime Minister and the most senior ministers of this country about exactly what preparations the government had in place if Britain was to simply leave the European Union and without a deal and revert to World Trade Organization rules. Now, the government stuck to it. They've decided that they can't... Go on, sorry, Nigel.
On balance, though, Theo, I mean, let's remember that one of the big promotions, or perhaps the biggest promotion yesterday, was David Lidington, who effectively becomes the new Deputy Prime Minister. And he, of course, is an arch Remainer. So overall, isn't this fairly neutral in terms of Leave Remain?
You're quite right to say that, Nigel. I mean, I pointed out the Brexit department, but you're quite right to say that David Lidington, he didn't get the title, though, has become the de facto Deputy Prime Minister. So Theresa May choosing for now, at least, just to try and steady the ship, keep everything even, not upset either the Remain camp of Tory MPs or the likes of Ian Duncan Smith, Jacob Rees-Mogg and the Leavers. They haven't got their wish on this one. They did get it with the budget when they asked for extra money in order to, extra £3 billion to prepare for a no-deal Brexit, but this time around they didn't get their wish. And of course, Justine Greening, she was out running this morning from her home in Putney, all smiles, and judging by her fairly pugnacious tweets along the lines that she was going to put her country before her party interests, she could well be a thorn in the side of Theresa May when that legislation bounces round in the autumn.
When we debated this on the Sunday show, I said that it's all well and good talking about diversity in terms of sex and in terms of racial background, but what nobody ever talks about is class. That there are so few working class people from humble origins that reach the top in politics. And I understand from The Guardian that actually there are even more middle class, privately educated people in the cabinet now than there were before the reshuffle.
You're quite right to say that. But interestingly, and I point you to a couple of appointments by Theresa May, people to look out for. I mean, the obvious one is Essex Man, as he's known, Brandon Lewis, the new chairman of the Conservative Party. And that seems to hint that the Prime Minister wants somebody in charge of the party itself who is going to go after UKIP voters, blue collar Labour voters, traditional working class Labour voters. And the other one, there are a couple of other ones that I think is quite interesting. And I don't know if you've ever come across him. Ben Bradley, the MP for Mansfield, 28 years old. He's been put in charge of young people and the youth vote as a vice chairman of the Tory party. He is not the polished public school performer of perhaps other people who have been promoted, and he's one to watch out for as well. And from judging the way he's been speaking, he's got a fair shot.
Okay, well, Theo, I tell you what, thank you for for bringing us up to speed. I'm pleased it wasn't quite as disastrously chaotic as it was yesterday. Theo, thanks for joining us. Have to say, actually, overall, will it make any difference? I don't really think so. Back to the action. Back to the Daily Mail being taken off Virgin Trains, the attack on people who advertise in the Express, in the Sun, the Mail. And I mentioned earlier an outfit called Media Matters in America going after conservative news organisations there. And joining me on the line next is Eric, who's calling from Chicago. Good afternoon, Eric.
Hey, Nigel. How are you? Nice to speak to you again.
I'm fine. Yeah, thanks for coming back on. So this has been happening in America for some time, hasn't it?
Yeah, there's been a lot of disrespect on both sides of the pond to the last two elections, most of them from 2016. People not respecting those votes, whether it be Brexit or Donald Trump. And it just seems Richard Branson's got it totally wrong here because he's cutting off a huge chunk of his clientele. Why don't you want to get those people, get their money, get the markup price for the Daily Mail when they ride your trains, especially since they're a service, they're a train service. They want to cast the biggest net as possible. I just launched a little news network, and I'm constantly talking about trying to grab as many people as possible. I don't know why he would want to go the other way. But it's in Media Matters you brought up. You brought up Owen Jones, so there's a lot of Marxists here that we need to talk about and who are problems, who are trying to brainwash the public into thinking their decision was wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you're right that a lot has come from 2016. There was a total lack of acceptance of those two dramatic election results. But it's deeper, isn't it, Eric, even than the Daily Mail or Media Matters? It's even now right through our universities, isn't it?
Yeah, our universities are the biggest echo chamber of all, especially the American universities, and I apologize for having that drift over to your side of the pond now. And it's even gone above the... Yeah, I apologize. But it's already gone above the border into Canada when you look at places like L'Oreal University and what everything that's happened there with their social justice tribunals convicting people of wrongthink. It's a huge problem.
Yeah, and Eric, it's funny that it's happening in America because you've actually got your Constitution actually states the freedom of people to speak as they wish, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And I think if Sir Richard Branson tried anything here, his business would take a huge hit. I'm sure it's going to happen in Britain as well. And they're not, like an earlier caller said, they're not necessarily styling and profiling at the moment. They should be careful.
Yeah, no, Eric, fair point. Thank you very much indeed. Well, there are risks, I suppose, for any company to take a political stand of any kind at all does involve a fair bit of risk. I was talking to quite a well-known national entertainer, and he has quite strong political views. And I said, how did you deal going around the country with Brexit? He said, I played it as neutral as I could because I feared whatever I said, I'd lose 50% of my audience. And I guess for commercial companies, there is that risk too. Sajil is joining us from Harrow. Good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. First time caller to the show. How are you?
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you. I'm fine. I'm just worried, Sajil. As I say, I think what we're seeing effectively is a form of censorship. It's a demonisation of people who've got conservative views, who've got patriotic views, and I think it's worrying.
Yeah, I'd just like to clarify on the point that you and your previous caller raised a couple of minutes ago, where he cited the case of the bakery. Now, these are two completely different things. The reason being that the bakery case relates to the Equalities Act of 2010. Parliament passed that act and said that there are certain protected characteristics that cannot be discriminated against. And I'm afraid that political opinion isn't one of them. So, as I believe you are a man of liberties, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, this isn't a legal matter. It's one of opinion. And if it's one of opinion, I don't see how this is any different than what brand of coffee they choose. It's what they choose to put on sale on their own trains. If they choose to not sell a newspaper, that's not illegal, and it's not related to the case of the baker. That's just an opinion. People are free as they choose to leave the train and buy their own newspapers. I think that to relate this to Remainer newspapers, as you put it, or to relate this to a lack of political freedom, I think it's a bit over the top. As I said, it's no different than what brand of coffee they choose.
Is it censorship, Sajil? Sajil, is it censorship?
I don't think it is. No, people are free to read what they want.
Well, they're not if they travel on Virgin trains, are they? I mean, come on, you know. Sejal, look, you know, whatever you may think about the Daily Mail and whatever you may think about private companies being at liberty to do within the law what they want, the fact is these trains are a public service, aren't they?
Yes, they are public service, but people are free to buy the newspaper or to read it online as they can, as they want. What they're only saying is, look, we're not going to sell this for whatever reason that is. If it is because what they say, then it's well within their freedoms. I think to link this to such a divisive thing as it is Brexit, it's just to stoke more fire onto...
Hang on, Sejal, I didn't do that. Virgin Trains did it. They didn't just withdraw the Daily Mail. They put out they disagree with the Daily Mail's editorial line on immigration, on gay rights, and on unemployment. I mean, they could have done it quietly, couldn't they? But they chose not to.
Yeah, but well, they didn't do that with the Telegraph, or they didn't do that with the Daily Star. They didn't do that with any other newspaper. Surely it was something that they wrote that they didn't agree with, and the fact that the Telegraph, for instance, which is a Romanian newspaper, is still selling there, it's hardly considered.
The Telegraph. No, Telegraph's a Leave newspaper. But anyway, Sejal, look, I tell you what, we may disagree, but the one point about LBC is we won't ban anyone as long as they're polite, as long as they behave. And we might disagree, Sejal, but you certainly have behaved. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, live from Brussels. It is now 7:47. I've only got 10 minutes left, and Sir Richard Branson has not yet responded to our kind invitation to have him on this show to argue his point. I can't understand it. I thought he'd been racing to be on here to explain his opinion. And of course, part of this debate is about whether we like the Daily Mail or not. It shouldn't be, but it always is, because the Mail raises very strong opinions. Annie says on Facebook, good riddance to the Mail. Well, okay, Annie, but, you know, I say it's really about choice. And I do genuinely believe this. Matt says, whatever happened to freedom of choice? Snowflakes eventually melt. And Jan says, Nigel, you've once again persuaded me to agree with you. Virgin may be a private company, but it still provides a public service, so they should cater for every type of reader. Jan, that is exactly my position on this. If it was a private shop, you know, sure, they are entitled to stock whatever they want, but this is part of an overall much bigger trend, which is why I had that discussion with Eric from Chicago about American universities. It's why I talked about, you know, companies like Paperchase and Pizza Hut being bullied into apologising for advertising with our leading selling daily newspapers. Simply can't be right, in my view. I wonder what Matthew in Leicester thinks. Good evening.
Well, I'm really sorry that I'm not Richard, so I do apologise, but I do disagree with you, purely because... Okay. And I'm looking at this from a slightly different angle, and I very rarely disagree with you, so I'm quite looking forward to this. In 2015, you went on to the Andrew Marr show, and you was quite rightly, and you was doing a sterling job, saying that you would be wheedling out people from your party that did not agree or conform to party ethics. Now, essentially, what Virgin Trains have done, and this is in my view, is they are stocking something which does not conform to their ethics and does not conform to their standards of what they want to be producing on their service. And so what they've done is they have eradicated it, just in the same way, and we won't mention any names because it's all in the past, that you have done with certain people in your former party as party leader. So I was running, Matthew, a political party. I wasn't running a public service. But would you say that as a political party, it is acting on behalf of the public? So therefore, in essence, it could be deemed as being a public service. Well, I felt public service in the same light, but you was acting upon the public. Matthew, I mean, for example, I felt that people with serious criminal records should not be allowed to be candidates for UKIP. But I don't think Richard Branson would say that people with criminal records couldn't travel on Virgin Trains. So I think there are some quite big differences between the two of them. And as I say, Matthew, you know, the way that Virgin Trains have described the Daily Mail, the issues they've raised, I mean, this is actually a political war, isn't it? I don't think the move was intended to be political. I think what they've essentially done is, because remember, it is also partly only by 2% less owned by Stagecoach. And I would imagine they will have had to have been consulted with regards to this. And obviously, Stagecoach services generally will contain something like the Metro or whatever, and they're free for anyone to take. So I think, again, they will have been consulted with this. And Stagecoach is a non-partisan company. I think that's been shown and proven. So essentially, I don't think it was originally designed as something political. However, I think it's also just a bit of coincidence that, if you're a Leaver, then you've only got Remain press to read. I'm a Leaver myself, so,
it's
that
not,
does genuinely...
Matthew, it's not a coincidence, Matthew. It is not. My worry is this. My worry, Matthew, with it. Let me put this back to you this way. Yeah. My worry is this. This kind of behaviour by Britain's best-known businessman, who is the biggest shareholder in this, all right? And he can't run away from this and say he's not responsible, because clearly he is, and who knows, he may ring him in the next couple of minutes. Who's to say? But my worry is this. This encourages a form of mob rule. And I think when you get these organisations being formed, as I said, Media Matters in America, Stop Funding Hate in this country, and when they encourage their group of activists to bombard commercial companies who are advertising, I think, and then a couple of PR people, young, inexperienced PR people, run a mile from it. I think we're headed towards mob rule, and that worries me, Matthew.
Yeah, I would agree. That is concerning. But I'll throw the question back to you. If you was the chief executive of a company, whether it's political, non-political, or whatever, and there was something which was believed or perceived to be by your screening department or your media department to be non-conformative or compliant to the ethics that you set out or your mission statement, would you continue down that course, or would you do something about it? And your track record,
Matthew, the point is,
you would do something about it.
Yeah, no, sure. But let's be clear. Stop Funding Hate are attacking The Sun, the Daily Mail, and the Sunday and Daily Express. They are attacking all the centre-right conservative papers. And I just think this is a worrying development from the left. Matthew, I'm going to love you and leave you. Thank you for your call, because I want to go to Catherine, who's calling from Great Yarmouth. Good evening, Catherine.
Hello, Nigel. Well, just a funny thing, while we were in the break, the first advert on was for Virgin Holidays. And the Virgin Holidays, I would have thought that they had a big clientele going to Florida on those planes who read the Daily Mail. I mean, this is also a private company, and it can be affected very seriously. But my real point is, this is the most dangerous thing that we have got going on in society at the moment. It's going on in Google. They are targeting right-wing websites. Twitter is just poof. Accounts who have 1 million people, maybe yours could just go instantly like that. These are private companies. We didn't vote for these people. They are not the Stasi. It is absolutely the most dangerous thing we've got going on in society at the moment, worldwide.
Now, the counter-argument would be that Twitter and other companies have removed people who have been putting out extremist, dangerous messages that have actually been encouraging violence and hate.
Yes, but it depends what is an extremist, dangerous message. I mean, if I show a picture of aeroplane going into 9/11, and that has happened to somebody this afternoon called Zivi Lando, who has thousands and has never, I would argue, encouraged hate. He has put up factual points. And
Catherine, I think you've brought a whole new dimension to this, but in many ways you're right. There is an increased degree of censorship. Freedom of speech is being cracked down upon. I thank you. There are limits, folks, to free speech. Of course there are. But I do not believe the Daily Mail ought to be banned from anywhere, even if they've regularly been beastly to me. So what? It's a free press. It's a democracy. You've been listening to The Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. I'm back tomorrow evening at 7.